Hello everyone, welcome back to the 10 days of JavaScript. Here we are in day number 4, and in this lesson we are going to learn about arrays. So what in the world is an array? Well, let's ask ourselves, in the English language, how would we use the word array? Well, for example, a car dealership might say that they have cars available in a wide array of colors. And that just means they have a lot of available colors. So when we hear the word array, just think of a collection. It doesn't matter what the collection is of, just that there's a collection made up of multiple items. That's enough of an introduction. Now let's jump right into the code and the action and have you roll up your sleeves and create your first array with JavaScript code. So go ahead and open up CodePen again. You can create a new pen or just use the same pen from the previous lesson if you still have it open. So in a previous lesson, we learned how to store a single value like this. Let my favorite number equal 7. However, what if we wanted to store multiple numbers? So plural, a collection of numbers. Well, we could do this. On a new line, I would say let my favorite numbers equal, the variable name doesn't really matter, you could make anything up, but let's set it to equal square brackets. If you're not familiar with these characters, it's directly to the right of the P key. So it's the same key as the curly bracket key, except this time we do not hold down Shift. So in JavaScript, a pair of square brackets like this is how you create an array. Inside the square brackets, we can include multiple values. So the number 9, and then comma, and I can include another value. So maybe 2, comma 8, comma 3, comma 7, comma 4. The idea is that an array is a collection, right? So now this variable, my favorite numbers, is storing a collection of all of these numbers in memory. And arrays are not limited to just numbers. So on a new line, we could say, let my words equal square brackets for an array. And then we could say red, comma, orange, comma, yellow. Okay, so this array is a collection of strings of text. This array is a collection of numbers. Or we could even create an array that is a collection of objects. So on a new line, we could say, let my pets equal an array, so square brackets. And then instead of including a simple number or a string of text, within the empty pair of square brackets, let's include an object. So this pair of curly brackets could represent a pet, and then we could include another pet by just saying comma and include another object. Okay, and then just as a quick example, we could build out these objects. So within the first pair of curly brackets, our first object could be a cat, and we could give it a property of name, so name colon, and give it a value of meows a lot. After the quotes for meows a lot, we could say comma and include another property, species, colon, and maybe give it a value of cat. Right, so we practiced this object syntax in our previous lesson. From this curly bracket to this curly bracket represents an independent entity or an object, in this case a cat named meows a lot. Okay, so this is the first pet in the array. Then in our second pet, within these curly brackets, we could create an object, name. Let's have it be a dog, so let's give it a name of barks a lot. After the quotes, comma, because we want another property within this object, and say species, colon, dog. You get the idea. Okay, now let's ask the really important question that you've probably been screaming at your screen for the last 4.5 minutes, and that is why? Why would we do this? Why would we want to create collections of values like this? Well, the answer is because collections like these, especially collections of objects like this is really no different from how most apps or websites work. For example, Facebook is really just an array of post objects that you scroll through. Twitter is really just an array of tweet objects that you scroll through. Or your email inbox is really just an array of email objects that you scroll through. So we had an array of pet objects, but imagine if it was your email inbox. Instead of name, maybe this property would be from, and it would have the from email address. And then instead of species, maybe this would be to, and then it would have the to email address. And then maybe there would be another property named body, and that would contain the actual email message itself. The point that I'm trying to make here is that a lot of programming is really just working with arrays. For example, if you were on Facebook and you posted or created a new post, you're really just adding a new item to the array of posts. Or if you were in your email inbox and you deleted an email, you're really just removing an item from an array. So right now, why don't we practice adding a new item to one of our existing arrays, and also we can practice removing an item from one of our arrays. Let's start with adding an item. So imagine down here, we want to write a new line of code that maybe adds the word green to our existing mywords array, right? So as of this moment, the array contains the words red, orange, and yellow. So down here, how can we write a bit of code to programmatically add the word green onto the end of this collection? Well, let's begin by working with this variable name. So it's my words, and then a dot to look inside it. And now, right now, you might be thinking to yourself, why a dot? Isn't a dot or a period how we look inside an object? And the answer is yes, it is. An array is actually just a special type of object. It's not exactly the same type of object as we learned about in our previous lesson, but it's a special type of object that has access to its own abilities or methods. And these are abilities and methods that we do not need to add or create ourselves, but rather these are abilities that the array just has out of the box. They are provided by the JavaScript language itself. So for example, all arrays have access to a method named push. So we can say my words dot push. So we are calling this function or method named push, and this is how we can add an item onto the end of an existing array. So within the parentheses for this method or function, we can just include an argument of green. Okay, and now how can we test this out? How can we make sure that the array was actually updated? Well, in previous lessons, we used the alert annoying pop-up to try and test something out. But now I want to show you something a bit easier to use. So our JavaScript environment, in this case the web browser, has an object named console, and we can say console.log, and anything we include within these parentheses will get output or logged to the console. So this is a great way to test your code. It lets you see your values visually so you can make sure that it's working the way that you expect. So why don't we log the mywords array out to the console so we can see what it contains. So console.log, in the parentheses, just say mywords. Okay, and then how do we actually see the console? Well, if you just right-click down here in the preview part of CodePen, I'm going to choose the inspect option. Remember, that opens your developer tools, and then just look for the tab named console. Okay, now you might need to make a slight change to your code in order to have CodePen execute everything once again. So maybe get rid of this and just console log the word hello. And then if you check your console, let me make this a bit easier to read. There we can see hello. Okay, so now we can just change this back. Instead of hello, what we actually want to log out to the console is our mywords variable, our array. So now if we check the console, and here we see the contents of our array, and notice the last item is green. That means that this line of code successfully added green to the end of that array. And this is cool because we did not need to create a function or method named push. The push method is just a native built-in part of the JavaScript language that arrays automatically get access to. And this actually brings us to one of the neatest aspects of JavaScript. So in the JavaScript language, almost everything, not everything, but almost everything is actually an object, or at the very least gets treated or interpreted as an object. So this is not just the case with arrays, but also even simple strings of text or numbers. Each type of data gets access to its own set of superpowers or abilities, or we should say functions or methods. So for example, and this has nothing to do with arrays, but it's important to understanding JavaScript. So if down here, if we created a variable and named it my name and set it to equal a string of text, in this case, whatever your name is, yes, this is just a simple string of text, right? It does not look like the cat object that we created in our previous lesson. However, behind the scenes, JavaScript is actually going to treat the string of text as if it was an object. And it's actually going to get access to abilities or methods that are specific to strings of text. So for example, try this out with me. We could say console.log and log out our my name variable. In the console, there you can see it. However, if we wanted all of the letters in our name to be capitalized, check this out. Instead of just my name, we can say my name dot to uppercase. So strings of text have access to a method or ability named to uppercase. And then we just include parentheses to run or call that method. And if I check the console, there we see our name in all capital letters. And really quick, just for fun, I want to show you that even the number data type gets access to its own special abilities. So let me delete these 2 lines of test code where we said my name equals Brad. And let's say let my number equal 7.89. So this is just a simple number, right? It doesn't look like an object. However, behind the scenes, JavaScript is going to give it access to methods or abilities related to numbers. So on a new line, if we log this out to the console, console.log my number, there we see the number 7.89. And now imagine if we wanted to round that to the nearest whole number. Well, in JavaScript, we could just say my number dot to fixed. So parentheses to call or run the toFixed method. And if we check the console, 7.89 got rounded up to 8. Cool. Now, if the last 3 minutes did not make perfect sense, that's okay. It was a bit of a tangent, but the big picture idea is simply that different types of data have access to different abilities or methods. Now back to the topic at hand, which is arrays. So let's delete these 2 lines of code for my number. Okay, and back on track. We've learned how to add an item to an existing array. Now let's learn how to remove an item from an array. So let's imagine that down here, we want to write a new line of code that maybe removes the word orange from the my words array. So down here, we can just say my words dot, and there is a method named splice. And the splice method lets us remove a particular item from an array. Within the parentheses, we want to pass this method 2 arguments. So just as placeholders, I'm going to say a comma b. Now the first argument is the index of which item you want to get rid of. So what does that mean? Well, if we look at our array up here, red, orange, yellow, and each item is represented with a numerical index. Now you might think that red would be 1, orange would be 2, and yellow would be 3. But arrays in JavaScript are 0-based, which really just means we start counting at 0 instead of 1. So red would have an index of 0, and then 1, and then 2. So if our hypothetical goal is to remove orange, orange has an index of 1. right? 0, 1, 2. So down here in splice, for the first argument, let's say 1. And then the second argument is how many items you want to remove starting from that index. So we're just going to say 1. We only want to get rid of one item. And now let's test this out. Let's see if it's doing what we expect it to do. So let's log out our array to the console, console.log, and let's just log out my words, our array. And now if I check the console, perfect. We just have red, yellow, green. Now practice makes perfect, and I know the idea of the numerical index might be confusing. So instead of removing orange, what if we wanted to get rid of red? Well, red is the first item, so it has an index of 0. So down here in splice, we would say 0, and we still only want to remove one item starting from that index. If we check the console, we see that red got removed. Perfect. And this concept of the numerical index is also how we can access the value of a particular item in an array. So for example, let's take our my favorite numbers array, and let's imagine that we wanted to access the value of the third item in the collection. So we know that it's a value of 8, but if we wanted to access it programmatically, down here at the bottom, we could say console.log, and the variable name is my favorite numbers. My favorite numbers. And then to look up an item in an array by its index, we just include a pair of square brackets after the array, and then we include the numerical index. So if we wanted the third item, we don't type 3 because remember arrays are 0-based, so the third item would be 2, right? 0, 1, 2. So if I check the console, cool, there we see the number 8. If we wanted to get the fourth item from the array, we could just change this from a 2 to a 3. You get the idea. Let's practice accessing an item in an array one more time. Let's imagine that we want to access the species of the second pet in our myPets array of objects. So we know that that's a value of dog, but how would we access that programmatically? So down here at the bottom, let's say console.log, start with the myPets array, square brackets, and we are interested in the second item in the array. So 0 would be the first item, 1 would be the second item. This would retrieve us the entire pet object, but then we want to look inside that object for the species value. So if we check the console, cool, there we see dog. Now let's bring this lesson to a close and explain why arrays are so important. So in addition to adding and removing items from an array, it's also very easy to make the computer sort an array alphabetically, or sort by some other quality. Or, perhaps most importantly of all, computers are really good at automating tasks. So once we have a collection or an array, it's super easy to make the computer do something once for each item in that array. For example, maybe displaying it visually onto the web page. And then remember at the end of our previous lesson, we learned how to do something every time the user clicked anywhere on the page. Well, you can imagine that we can watch for clicks on a particular button on the page, and then in response to that event, we can maybe add an item to an array, or remove an item from an array, or sort the array, or just work with the array in some interesting way that the user wants. Okay, now at this point, I do not expect you to be an expert on arrays, and you don't need to have remembered everything in this lesson. All you need to know is that an array is a collection of items, and that arrays have access to different methods like push and splice that let us manipulate or work with the array. If that makes even a little bit of sense, then you're on track and you're ready to move on to the next lesson. Up next, we are going to learn how to make decisions in our code. This is going to open up so many doors. So let's keep things rolling, and I will see you in the next lesson. The 10 Days of JavaScript is the first chapter for my upcoming premium course, Full Stack JavaScript from Scratch. I'm making these first 10 or 11 videos freely available on YouTube. And so for the next 10 days, I'm going to upload one new video each day. So stay tuned, or if you're watching this in the future, all the lessons are up, so feel free to binge watch. The full premium course is not available just yet, but if you subscribe to this channel, you'll be notified as soon as it's out. Or if you're watching this video in the future, it's already available. Enjoy!